What is going on, everyone? AP over here at Rump Your Sports. Bringing it to you once again. We got the Lineup Builder Show with our partner, Sabersim. We got Jordan, as we do each and every week. Jordan, what's going on, my man? How are you doing on this fine Thursday?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Been enjoying these NBA games here so far. We've had a pretty good first round. I like all these matchups. I mean, I know the Nets aren't what they were, winning most of the games they did in the regular season. Maybe that series is my least favorite one, but I feel like every other series, for me personally, has just been really interesting. Been watching a ton of basketball, playing DFS. It's been fun, so excited to get into this here.
Yeah, I mean, I got a little soft spot in my heart for this Nets team now because they were I almost shipped the last slate that they were on. I think it was Monday night, which actually is good to know because a few extra rest days always helps, especially when you're dealing with such a tight rotation because they really don't have anyone else. So I got a little soft spot in my heart for the Nets because that was a really fun slate there on Monday night. In the playoffs, man, so that's going to be the focus of today's show, and I'm with you, like. It is so much about trying to understand. You got to do a few things, and this is why you need an optimizer. You got to take advantage of like mispricing opportunities. We saw that with the Nets. That was my main argument on that slate on Monday with them. You had Cam Johnson, who ended up getting 41 minutes, who I thought was just a lock. I put him in every lineup. You had Tobias Harris on that slate, who I also thought was underpriced, and it was a good play. And I locked him in. And then, Mikhail, Dinwiddie, these guys are going to get so many minutes. But now here's the interesting thing. And we can dive. Actually, let's do this real quick before I dive into. I got a whole spiel I'm going to go down, which I think is really interesting because you got to now take advantage of the zig and zag because people are going to look at these last games. They're going to look at game 2 and they're just going to assume that, game 3 probably has to pan out the same way. And so if you get the zig and zag going on, you can really, you can really get some nice leverage in many of these spots when it comes to playoff basketball. Now, did you do a cash build right there?
Yeah, I did. I figured I'd get it going here, get the cash build going, the base build.
So actually, I can talk for a little bit. So it was a two-game slate on Monday night, Jordan. I was actually winning the $15 100K. The last play where Fox, I think, threw it down to Sabonis and he dunked it with 7 seconds left.
Yeah.
Because me and the guy who ended up winning, we both had Harrison Barnes. So the Barnes last rebound didn't matter. That assist right there put him 0.5 ahead of me in that contest, which was very unfortunate. A little 60K swing there. But the thing about that slate that was so interesting is you had one game that was a 240 total. That was the Warriors and the Kings. And then you had, and that's where all the ownership was. And then you had a 210 total where the game, we only saw 92 possessions in that game. The last game Philly and Brooklyn played. But due to pricing and rotations, you still had to have Cam Johnson. You still had to have Tobias Harris in there. You had to have those guys. So that's where when we get into these 3 games and other 2-game slates, it isn't necessarily about pace. Yeah, we want a fast-paced game. That's gonna bring in better conditions. It still comes down to pricing. Like today's slate's going to be a great example. There's so many, again, mispriced plays. Like they did not move Cam Johnson's price at all. And Cam Johnson, so now you got to think about it practically. Cam Johnson could not be stopped. And if you're Philly, all you got to do now is focus in on Cam Johnson. There's going to be so many things that you can do. And while it's a short slate, there's going to be a lot of ways just by making guesses on where ownership's going to go. And then, analyzing it and seeing if, what are the good plays, what are the bad plays. And right there, as I just said, I was kind of curious to see if Cam Johnson would be the highest owned or highest projected owned player. And at 5.8K, I mean, it's a no-brainer that he is, and he's going to be an awesome play on this slate. But so you got Wiggins, Cam Johnson, Chris Paul up there, Kuminga. That's interesting. I think the Warriors are going to be a really interesting debate. I think there's guys that they just don't trust right now, and so I like to get real aggressive both ways with the projections on some of these guys. Like if I think a guy like a Kuminga is really risky, and I think he's going to be mega chalk. You can get aggressive and bump him down to 15 and see what that does. So there's going to be so many things that we can do on this slate to help people get different while also not sacrificing, good lineups. What are you seeing with this base build?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one here tonight. Obviously, we've got the Draymond suspension here, and actually some injury news that's actually going to end up mattering here. We have the weird slate locks at 7:30 Eastern, and then the two later games start at 10 o'clock Eastern, or 10 and 10:30. And we might be waiting on some of the Warriors news there. I mean, I think they've definitely gotten incentive.
They're all playing.
You think
they're
so?
Definitely all. Oh yeah.
Okay.
That's the other thing too. And this is why it's really important to be in Discord. I was actually surprised when Giannis was doubtful, then upgraded to questionable. That's usually a sign that they're going to play. Mm-hmm. But we've been saying it. Like, I don't think this Bucks team really needs Giannis to win this series. Mm-hmm. We saw that yesterday with how they went off. But yeah, Gary Payton's going to play. Andrew Wiggins is going to play. And then they just don't trust Jordan Poole right now at all. So we'll get into that game. But I don't – like Cam Payne might not play, but I don't think he really matters too much. But I think the Warriors those guys have to play. And there's nothing there that makes me think that they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that does jump out to me here a little bit is we are a fair bit spread out on these exposures. We've run these cash builds before here to do this, and we'll see 2, 3, even 4 guys at like 100% exposure. What that's telling me is that, I mean, obviously there's going to be some elite plays on this slate, but I think that things are going to be a little bit more spread out. I think when people sit down to build their lineups, they're going to see quite a spread of lineups that are all projected pretty close together. So it might be a good opportunity to get over the field on some of the plays that we really think are some of the best plays on the slate, because I'm not seeing that here in the exposures. So
here's one thing, if you're watching this right now, that you can do, and if you're a member at Saber, either directly through Sabersim or with us over at Run Pure Sports. One thing that you can do right away, you can run the same base build off these base projections, and just make note of like the highest owned guys in like we ran 100 builds, 45. That's enough. So I wrote down Cam Johnson, Wiggins, CP3, Kuminga, Royce, Claxton, and then what you do, or you could just wait till later on in the slate and just see, okay, what are the 5 to 6 highest owned guys going to be? And one simple thing that you can do is go through each, and obviously when you're analyzing these games, and you can say, okay, what's good chalk, what's bad chalk, and then go through it, and you can kind of a process of elimination for how you can get different. And now I'm not saying absolutely fade those guys, just get aggressive on the downside with their projection. So let's go back through this and let's go game by game. I made note of those players that were popping, and I kind of agree with that, like Cam Johnson. So let's start with this first game. Let's start with the Nets side.
Yeah.
So this is such a bad matchup for the Nets. I think almost any other matchup, even like Boston. Boston's the best team in the East by far. I still think they have a better chance of like stealing a game against Boston than Philly, just from a pure matchup standpoint, because right now what they're doing in game 2, the Nets went small. And so you saw so Claxton played like 15, 18 minutes, maybe 20, but I know he didn't play very much. And they went small to make it awkward on Embiid, and then they threw doubles at him as well. And the problem with that is now Embiid can find the open guy. He can kick it out and find Maxey, who absolutely went off, or Tobias Harris or Harden. And then the problem is they went away from the Embiid doubles, and then what happens? Embiid just smashes. So, like, it's literally the worst matchup. But when you look at this team, there's 3 guys they trust right now. It's Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Spencer Dinwiddie. We know those rotations are solid. Dorian Finney-Smith started out really hot in game 2, but then he wasn't a factor in the second half. And it was Royce O'Neal. So I think they trust Royce O'Neal, Cam Johnson, Bridges, Dinwiddie. Everyone else is kind of a wild card. Joe Harris, he's been absolutely dusty. Seth Curry has been kind of nice when he's in there, but man, they don't trust him. Day'Ron Sharp, it's just, if they're going small, they're not going to use them. So, like, all right, so Day'Ron Sharp is one I would just X out for now. If the game blows out, he could factor in, but I just don't see it. I think what we do is we bump down Claxton. So let's get aggressive with this bump down. Let's take it down by like 5 or 6 points. because if we think back to what the Nets did, they were competitive in the first half. When they went small, they made it awkward on Philly. So I do think that's going to be their best path. Spencer Dinwiddie continues to be the guy that needs to be better. And man, he made so many bad mistakes. I think maybe at home it helps him. One thing I'll also do is try to remember, okay, where was the industry at on him in games 1 and games 2? Because in game 3 at home, it's going to be a better environment for Dinwiddie. So like when you go back and look at those projections, actually, could we do that? Let's go back to, it would be Monday. And we can, and this is the other thing I love about Sabersim. So like without taking, all right, so Dinwiddie 37. All right. So that's,
36 minutes projected for 37. We did have him. I mean, it was a smaller slate, 2-game slate, but at 40% owned. So I'm curious, like, just was he one of the? So I mean, we had him projected. I don't know how it came out as one of the higher owned plays there on Monday's slate.
And from a position standpoint, he definitely was. He keeps underwhelming, but the minutes are going to be there. So I actually agree with where the projection's at on him. I think we can keep him right there for today's slate. I was going to say right between like 38.5 and like 40.5. I do want to have Mikal Bridges projected higher because he is definitely the alpha. And so I think 40 is fine, 38 too. And then Cam Johnson. So this is where, like, he had such a good game, but man, my one worry with him now, the 3 days of rest definitely helps. But if we think back to game 2, he got like barely any ownership at all. And so it's just the perfect spot. Now, after everyone saw game 2, everyone's going to be playing him. I think that projection's fair. But one thing I want to see right out of the gate, let's actually bump him down, because I think what Philly will want to do is try to take him out of the game, which I think could benefit Royce O'Neal, who's going to come off the bench. So let's bump Royce O'Neal up by a couple points. His shot has been terrible, but they trust him defensively. I could see him being kind of an impact guy off the bench. And then let's just keep everyone else the same. I think that's fine. Let's go to the Philly side. Now, I don't want to – on this slate, it's different than when we had just 2 games. I think that the third game makes so much of a difference. And now I start to factor in pace a little bit more. So we got to keep in mind this game's going to play slower than every other game on the slate. Like the Warriors game without Draymond, that game is gonna be insane. Going over here, so a couple of things. If we want to go back and use kind of historical data in what we've seen with this Philly team, we don't have a ton, but Maxey, if we go back to last year, he was terrible on the road. Like, we saw such a drop off in his production on the road compared to when he was at home. It was almost like night and day. Maybe we take a stab and maybe we say, okay, we know Maxey probably going to be a little bit higher owned on the slate. Let's just bump him down by 3 points. I think they continue to try to make it tough on Embiid. They're going to want to play slow. They're not going to want to let him take over this game. Let's bump him down by 2 or 3 points. I actually think the 2 guys in this game, it's going to be James Harden and Tobias Harris that are going to have to step up. The one thing I saw, and I'm not let's get aggressive with Tobias Harris. Like, what I see for leverage right out of the gate is everyone's going to go Cam Johnson. But when you actually think about it, at the end of the day, what's the likelihood that like a Tobias Harris that should play similar minutes to Cam Johnson actually outscores him? I think I would say maybe like 60-40 to Cam Johnson's side, maybe 65-35. But now when you factor in the leverage we can get, because I can't see Tobias Harris, what do we have, a 8%, 9% ownership projection on him?
Yeah, pretty low for all these Sixers guys here.
And Tobias has been awesome in the playoffs. So I did a full analysis. If we go back over the last 2 years, and I'm like a Tobias Harris hater, but he's been their most consistent guy on the Philly side. So we're bumping him up. I want to actually bump him. So go to the Cam Johnson side. I want to bump him just slightly over Cam Johnson because they're about the same price tag.
So we got them both at 30, so maybe 31 there.
Yeah, I like that. And then let's get aggressive with Harden. I think Harden on the road, when we think about what the Nets are going to do now, it's probably take away Maxey, because what did we see in game 2? We saw Maxey go off. We saw Embiid go off. And I think if I'm the Nets, your best chance of winning is doing what you did in game 1. Make Harden beat you. Make James Harden go 7 for 13 from 3-point range. That's going to be their way to do it. So that's how I see game one playing. And this is what I'll do, Jordan. I'll walk through and I'll just be like, okay, how could these different games play out? And I'll create some different scripts, and that's how I run my stuff. I could definitely see this game playing out like that. I do think that Philly maybe sweeps them, and then game 4 will be really interesting. But what are your thoughts on this game as we're breaking it down?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm curious your thought on kind of just where the public is on this game. My general sense today is that people kind of like the Nets side and expect them to come out and play pretty well in their first game at home and maybe at least take a game off here. With the ownership projections here and just how good Philly has looked, I'm almost more interested in just playing the angle on this game that the Nets can't play with the Sixers and that the Sixers win this game again. And I think maybe some of my favorite plays on this slate, just looking at ownership alone, are on the Sixers side here. But I don't know if that's your sense of how people are thinking about this game. That's just kind of the vibe I've gotten here early this morning, that people are kind of on this Nets side for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the Nets' only chances of winning a game in this series is to shoot lights out from 3. It's all they have. They can't, like when Dinwiddie tries to drive, isolate and drive when the shot clock's running down, he stands no chance. You got Embiid in there, and Embiid has been awesome at just fitting him off. And so you have a layup that is almost as tough as a 3-point shot. So in my opinion, it has to be a group effort. They all have to make their threes. And that includes Curry, even includes Joe Harris, who has been absolutely terrible. And I can't go there. So I'm with you. I think Philly comes in. I think they win. I think they sweep. This is the one series I think could definitely get where they could get swept. And a lot of it just has to do with how bad the matchup is. So I agree with you there. And I also think the pace is not going to be favorable at all.
I was just going to quickly say, just looking purely at ownership projections alone, if you want a way to immediately just get different while still building a lineup with upside, I think it's going to be the Philly studs that are going to get you there. You can tell that there is going to be a difference between Embiid, Harden here, and some of the other top pay-up options on the slate. Just ownership projections alone, I think it's probably the best way to get different without sacrificing a lot of projection there. So I do like it from that direction.
Yeah, I very, very much agree with that. I think I think we would all agree that understanding what are the Warriors going to do is probably the biggest question on the slate, right? Mm-hmm. No Draymond. Just looking at it, you got I think it's telling. Watch it. This is where I'm so high. Projections are everything when it comes to NBA. It's the sport where you could definitely project it, I think, easier than any other sport. The one thing about the playoffs and just picking up on kind of the vibes of these teams, I think goes a long way too. What did I see in game 2 from the Kings Warriors? Jordan Poole, goofing around late in the fourth quarter, just laughing, doing weird stuff. The dude played 14 minutes. When he was in there, he had 3 or 4 turnovers. He was very sloppy and who knows what's going on with him, but they don't trust him at all. Gary Payton is the guy that they trust over him. I think we're going to see one of the tightest Warriors rotations that we see. This is a must-win game. Mm-hmm. They are fired up because Draymond got suspended. He shouldn't have been suspended, but the league with Draymond, it's because it's Draymond Green. They're going to do that. And, and in his defense, yeah, he probably didn't need a stomp on him, but the guy, Sabonis clearly pulled him too. I mean, just thinking back through that play, Draymond should have just fell over and tried to make that more of just Sabonis tripping him and getting Sabonis kicked out. But that's neither here nor there. So I think we're going to see a really tight Warriors rotation. So I think it's going to be Curry 40+ minutes, Clay 40+ minutes. So I got it. Wiggins, Curry, Clay. I bet they all play 42, 43 minutes. This is going to be a game where those 3 guys have to almost play the entire game because DiVincenzo was not good. Poole was not good. I think Gary Payton is the other guy that's going to have to play 35 minutes here. And then when you go back and you looked at the rotation, and then when you consider the matchup here, it was when Draymond got thrown out, Looney was the guy that came back in. Mm-hmm. I think Looney is going to have to play big minutes. Now, here's the other thing about on the other side of this game. Actually, before I get to that, let's get aggressive with the Warriors, guys. Let's bump up Curry. Let's bump up Clay. Let's bump up Wiggins. Get real aggressive. But then I want to set a rule here too. I want to set a rule that is simply Clay or Curry, but they can be paired with Wiggins. So it's just like an either or rule with Clay or Curry, because I think one goes off and then maybe the other doesn't get to that optimal level. But I think Wiggins is the guy that will definitely correlate with them fine. Yeah, I like that.
So I think that rule will do it. Just no Clay or Curry in the same lineup there.
Yeah. And the other reason with doing it like this, we can get aggressive with the projections because we want the projections to force them in there, but we want them to separate out. So it's, Curry builds, Klay Thompson builds, and then we got Wiggins, who I like that. I want to be under on Jordan Poole.
Mm-hmm.
Way, like, take him down like 7. Yeah, there you go, 20. 23. That's
23.
Yeah. I want to be under on Kuminga. Like 15, I think. I want to be over on Gary Payton. I think what we do is bump him up to like 23. And I want to be I think we leave DiVincenzo where he's at. I think that's fine. And then Looney, I think we keep him where he's at too. I think that's fine because Looney's going to be in there for defensive purposes. And that leads me to the Kings side. Now, I think when I think about what the Warriors were doing, they were trying to make life as hard as possible on Sabonis with Looney, and then you'd have Draymond that would come down and just Draymond would either just check Sabonis or you'd see a double. I actually like Sabonis a little bit in this matchup, where now he's only worried about Looney. He could easily get Looney in foul trouble, and then if that happens, he's going to be an absolute beast down there. So let's bump up Sabonis. I think this is going to be a tougher spot for Fox because a couple things. I think when you think about what the Warriors are going to do now to counter, no Draymond is a huge issue defensively. But if I'm the Warriors, what do? Who's been killing me? It's been Fox and Monk. Those two guys are. How do I counter on them? And how do I do it early? I do it with Andrew Wiggins, and I do it with Gary Payton. So I want to actually be under on Monk and Fox, take them down. And what we're doing right now is we're just building out game scripts. And this is how I think the game's going to go. You don't have to agree with me at all. Maybe it's, JSU does a really good job at this on the Up to Lock show when he goes through each game and he starts breaking them down. What I'm trying to show the people out there is listen to those people that are breaking it down, or whoever you want to, or if you're reading, a piece of news or our article, or, you're in Discord, and make some of these adjustments like we are right here. And I think that's a really good way to use this. Now, Kevin Huerter was awesome. He got into foul trouble. I think he picked up his 5th foul going into the 4th quarter. And the Davion Mitchell. So the lineup was Monk, Fox, Sabonis, Harrison Barnes, and Davion Mitchell. That crew was playing so good. They just rode them the entire 4th, which is obviously a game script type of thing. If the Kings were playing from behind, they would go a different route. I think it would be they would want more offense over like a Davion Mitchell. And so I actually like Kevin Huerter here. I want to be more aggressive on him because I think people are going to forget about that. They're maybe not going to actually dive into the rotation and realize that he was in foul trouble, or else he would have, it was the game flow and how it went in the 4th quarter that led them to have more of a defensive front versus offensive with Davion Mitchell. And Davion Mitchell was a hero for me, but man, he was as efficient as you could be in that game. And he was in there for defensive purposes on Steph Curry. So you have a lot of risk there with Davion. Like if Davion's if he's going to get some ownership here, I would rather actually be under on him in this game. And so like, let's take him down a couple points. Yeah. And Harrison Barnes is going to be kind of that staple piece. I think we bump him in the 25 to 26 range. I think is more appropriate just because he's not the best, per minute producer. But he's going to be in there. And then Keegan Murray, man, he just doesn't fit. I've just been Xing him out. If he beats me, he beats me. But I don't want him in any of my lineups. Down a little bit.
Oh, there he is.
Yep, right there. So yeah, now let's go to this series. So this is where like pricing starts to come into play. So DraftKings, they increased the price tags on Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, CP, I think a couple points, and Ayton is about the same. Here's one thing I want to do. I want to X out all Landry, Shamet, and Down. I just want to X them out. And the reason is because this Suns team, they got, 3 superstars on this team, and they have a really tight rotation. And now pricing comes into play because all of these guys start to take away from each other. Sure, you could have an individual game where KD goes off or, Booker goes off. It was Booker last game, KD this game. Another spot where I think we make a rule. I think our rule is one of KD or Booker. I think is a fine rule. And CP is fine. I just, I worry about his like durability through the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't mind being like 2 points under on him relative to where we're at. Because I think he was a guy, he was our third highest own. Let's bump him down to like 30, 36 just to see what it does. And I think I'm actually fine with, I think Kevin KD probably fine right there. And then Booker, maybe let's go like 49 something and 47 for Booker and like 49 for KD. And then Ayton, I think, is probably fine. And then I do like Torrey Craig. Let's bump him up just a couple points. We don't want to get too aggressive for him, but they don't. The one thing that the Suns lack right now is depth. Mm-hmm. If they have any injuries, like even if Chris Paul goes down, they're screwed. Like they got to stay healthy, or else they're not going to make it far. And then let's go to the Clippers side, which I think is one of the tougher to break down. Outside of Kawhi Leonard, I trust Kawhi Leonard's minutes. He's got to play a ton. I think we bump him slightly over where KD's at. And I don't trust the bigs here. So, like, I want to be under on Zubac, and I want to be under on Mason Plumlee, just because what we saw the Suns start to figure out is, like, I don't think the Clippers were switching a lot. And so what happens is there can be a lot of tough matchups where Zubac just is not going to get out there and guard these guys. And so it's going to leave a lot of wide open guys on the Suns side. So I think the bigs here are a liability. Now the thing is figuring out, okay, if they go small, which we saw a few times, who's it going to be? I think Terrence Mann has been kind of impressive. He's not the best producer, so I don't want to get too aggressive on him. So we can bump him up a little bit. I think the guy that has to be the guy in this one is Norman Powell. He's the one guy, 4'9". I don't mind the price tag. I think maybe he gets some ownership, but not like crazy. Let's get aggressive, like 25, 26 with him. Yeah, and then Russ, man, I'm not. I mean, if Russ beats me, he beats me. That's kind of the mentality. I think. So here's where, like, I will compare it to other guys in that range at that position. So, like, Russ, who could we play over him? Well, I kind of like Dinwiddie over him. I know Dinwiddie's going to get 40-plus minute. I'm not playing Russ over Dinwiddie on the slate, even though Dinwiddie's been a huge bust. That's where I would compare Russ. And then we know the Clippers, they have to run everything through Kawhi Leonard. He's been the best player in this series by far. And so I think they continue to do that. They continue to have Russ focus on defense. So, yeah, I think we're fine with his projection where it's at. What are you thinking about these last two games? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like the adjustments we've made here. One of the things that did stand out, you mentioned Looney here as a guy that's like going to have to – he's like the last big standing here. I mean, they're going to have somebody that can – play some minutes out there. I think 25 feels maybe a little bit low. That might be one name that we didn't touch here that I might give a little bit of a boost to, just because I think he is going to soak up some minutes there. But otherwise, I like the way that we've broken these games down here. One thing that I was kind of checking on, and you can use this too when we're talking about some of the groups, and if you want to group certain players out, is the correlations. Just taking a look. I did look at Curry here because I was curious when you mentioned Clay. Give it a second to load. But the most negatively correlated player to Curry was actually Jordan Poole, which I found a little bit interesting here, a guy that we're already kind of down on, so we don't need to worry about. But it does make some sense there. We do see Klay Thompson with the slight negative correlation there as well. But that was another thing that I was kind of looking at here as you were breaking these games down. But I like the angle we've got on these.
Yeah, and it's more so more of like an eye test for me. Like I don't have numbers to back it up. It seems like in the past it's like a Curry game or a Clay game.
Yeah.
And this is why one thing I've done is kind of broken up my builds into a series of builds where I'll change the script a little bit. So like I could run my first 20 builds. So I've been running between 30 and 40. I could run my first 20 with this rule on, and then maybe for my last 10, I take the rule off. And it's I go old school, Jordan. So what I've been doing is copy and pasting them over the CSV. I know that you definitely would frown upon doing that, but that's what I've been doing just with some of these scripts. But yeah, I mean, it might have to be both. They both might have to go off though to keep pace with the Kings, and we'll see if Davion Mitchell can continue to hold up against Curry. It's been really impressive, but Steph Curry is a beast, man. I know they call off Davion Mitchell off night for a reason, and I've been impressed. I know, like I always made fun of him whenever he'd get these spot starts when Fox was out or something because he would always bust. Now I see why they got him and why they kept him. I mean, he's been an absolute beast in this matchup in the playoffs. I've been very impressed with him defensively. Let's run this build and just see what it looks like now. And so one thing I'm going to be looking at is, and let's bring the sim diversity down to 1 because I really want to, since we're adjusting these projections and we're betting on these game scripts panning out like we've discussed, I really want to run this first build just looking at our highest projected own and get an idea of, okay, what leverage stances are we taking? So like things that I'm going to be looking for right now is Cam Johnson, previously was our highest owned guy. We bumped him down a few points. Where does he land? If he still lands on a lot of builds, what does that tell us? It tells us he's probably a good play tonight and that, hey, let's just leave it alone and let's just lock him in. That's kind of what I do with that. I would do the same thing with CP3 if he was up there. Kuminga. If Kuminga hit a lot of our builds, what would that tell me? That would tell me we're going to need some value on this slate. So maybe Kuminga is the value we look at, or maybe we try to find a different piece in that range to get us different.
Yeah, and I think this can be useful. This is basically running something very similar to that base build we did, the cash build at the beginning, but now with the updated game scripts of how we think the games are going to play out. I like this quite a bit here. Just seeing the difference in between those first two builds here, I think could be pretty useful.
Yeah, I like that too.
Give this just a second here to finish up here.
1,500. I like it.
Yeah. We might as well. One of the things that did stand out to me, I was just kind of looking here off screen. The Suns are really riding their guys. That was one thing. I mean, we had, let me pull it back up here. Kevin Durant played 44. Devin Booker played almost 45 minutes in game 2. I wonder, we have them as projected as the highest minutes guys on the slate at like 40. I wonder if they're going to get up there again, if we see that Phoenix is kind of basically playing this as must win, or if they're going to be a little bent tired. I don't know. What do you think about the minutes on the Phoenix guys?
I think they're gonna continue to run out of tight rotation. I don't like Terrence Ross was a guy that I was surprised we didn't see him crack the rotation. That just tells me they don't trust him. Mm-hmm. Can you sort it by highest projected scoring?
Yeah.
No, see the small slate on the right there. No, keep going over the builds.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. There we projected score. Yep. And then now let's see what our highest own. So Royce O'Neal. Royce O'Neal was one of those pivots that we talked about. Curry. So we're not getting it. So this is where it's like, what could you do? Because we set that rule. Well, it's like now we're 100% Curry, so we're not going to have any Clay. What I do here is I say, okay, well, what if I set a rule where I cap Curry at 50? Do I get then what I would look at is, okay, now am I getting 50% Clay also? That's a way I would love to run this. So like every build has 3 Warriors, which I like. I don't know if I like 4. 4 could make sense, but I like how these 3 Warriors builds look. The Looney, Wiggins, Curry, or Curry, Gary Payton, and Wiggins. I mean, Wiggins is definitely the guy that, is going to be a really strong play. And then I think the Norman Powell is really interesting too. Going to come off the bench, but they just have to get him going. I think he has to be like the Clippers are still the team I don't trust. Like Ty Lue can do the craziest things, even in the playoffs. He's a great coach from that standpoint. Makes it tougher to predict from a DFS standpoint, though. But if I were to predict any guy to get more run, have more production, to take some pressure off Leonard, because it can't be on the offensive end. It can't be Russ because Russ' shot is terrible. Has to be a guy like Norman Powell. So I like how that sets up. We got some Sabonis in there. I like that too. So, okay, you set it at 50, and now we get 50 Curry, 50 Clay. Love it. And we didn't even mess with the projection there too.
No, yeah, I just set a 50 max exposure there. Now we're getting half and half. So it's actually either Curry or Clay and Wiggins in 100% of lineups right now with the Sabonis run back on the other side too.
How much Philly are we getting? Seems like we're not getting any.
Not a lot,
Philly, right?
Tobias Harris showing up a bit here, but that's it.
Another key to this slate might be these Philly guys like you talked about. They're just not going to pop. So you still got to be like smart and careful about it. And I think that's where the rules can really come into play. What do we project James Harden projection to be, or not projection, projected ownership to
10% right now.
10%. And he isn't hitting. How many builds of the 1,500 did he hit out of 46?
5% of them. So we could get some exposure there.
I think we lost Jordan. Oh man. So yeah, actually we're gonna wrap this up here shortly anyway. But we had Jordan's screen up. I don't have my screen up right now, obviously, but really, kind of to wrap up what we were doing there is something that all of you can do with Sabersim for the Sabersim subscribers. I like to use that tool to, one, figure out where everyone else is going to go. I make notes. I jot that down. And then I look at where are the pivots? Who could we pivot to? Cam Johnson, going to be mega chalk tonight. I like Cam Johnson. I'm not saying to fade him at all. It's just, are there viable pivots to move off of them? Or if Cam Johnson fails, who's going to be the person that steps up, which we thought it would be Royce O'Neal. There he is.
Yeah, I lost you for a second there.
Got your screen back to it?
Yep, screen's back. I don't know where I cut out. I was just saying I do like the angle of getting some exposure to those Philly guys. The upside's obviously there. We don't need to worry about the upside of a guy like Embiid or Harden. And it just seems like you are going to get a big ownership discount really on this slate here.
Can you do two things, and then we do got to get out of here, but can you pull up a Clay build? I just want to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Versus Curry, and then I wanted to see a Harden build. So yeah, with Clay, so now you got to think about the position differences with Clay. Who's going to now fill in that spot at the point guard spot? Dinwiddie right there. We talked about it. Dinwiddie needs to have a good game. So I like that route, and I actually like that rule quite a bit. I think when you're multi-entering, especially like 20 max, you got to think about those rules. Mm-hmm. Like you need for Clay and Curry, they could both get there for sure. But for them to be optimal in large field stuff, you need the absolute nut script. Mm-hmm. I do think it's far more likely that you see a Wiggins with one of Clay or Curry, a Gary Payton with one of Clay or Curry. So I really like that rule. That's probably one I'm going to stick with. You could also make the argument that maybe you could create that rule with like a Dinwiddie or Mikal Bridges too. So there's little things like that you can do to help build out a more efficient game script when using Sabersim.
Yeah, and you mentioned Mikal Bridges. That was another guy I wanted to quickly check on. We didn't get a ton of him here. So, I mean, that's another one. We're under the field on him right now. That was a guy we liked and bumped. That might be another opportunity to go in here. I mean, we have 16% in the pool. So that might be another name here worth seeing if we can get a little bit of additional exposure there.
Yeah, I like that. Can you, last thing, the James Harden build. I know we'll have to go into the pool with that. I want to see what those look like. So, yeah, I mean, Curry, Harden, Royce, we talked about him, Looney. Yeah, I mean, those builds are going to be real contrarian, but it would not surprise me at all if Maxey continues to struggle on the road like we saw last year. It has to go back to Harden. Harden's 8.9 price tag. This is, again, where if you run a strategy like mine, so like if I would have pulled up my builds from Monday, I was 100% Cam Johnson, 100% Tobias Harris. I took some really, really strong stands, but I'm only running 20 to 40 lineups. If you're doing that in this format and competing against the 150 maxers, you got to make stands like that. Like if you're running 20 max tonight and you just think that, man, it's going to be a Harden game over Maxey, take a stand. The playoffs we got a lot of games left. There's a lot of time left don't be worried about being wrong on one slate. Like last night, a big stand I took was Kyle Anderson, slow-mo Kyle Anderson. I thought he was going to start. He didn't start, but there really wasn't much I could do to pivot at that point in time, so I just stuck with it. He still got like 26, 27 minutes. I had him at I thought he was going to start and get like 33 minutes. Their offense was better with him there, and he had like a game that was not efficient for him when you think about what he can do, but he was only 3% owned. So while I was I had him at 70, 80%, he was a bust for me. I still ended up breaking even on the night, which was perfectly fine because I had a lot of Edwards too. But I love the stand because Kyle Anderson's a guy that could get you 40 with how he plays. So James Harden is a guy that could get 55, 60 here. And if he does that at 10% ownership at 8.9K, I mean, Jordan, that's what you want in tournaments. So, and that's why I love this type of format because if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I move on we got a slate tomorrow, So, and we can go through the same process again. But Jordan, you got any final thoughts? Because I do gotta get running. But
yeah, as we've been going through it, I like it more and more. My favorite angle this slate, I like the Phillies guys. Phillies. I like the Philly guys. I think that's probably the angle that I'll end up taking here. I like Joel Embiid or James Harden in the winning lineup tonight.
One other rule with the Philly guys is I think you do set, if Embiid goes off, it's typically like a takeover game. Maybe they go away from the Embiid doubles. If he does that, some of those games where he breaks a slate, it's all him and the guys get, and so I will create definitely like an Embiid or Harden. I think Tobias is maybe fine. And Maxey, the price is close, but like my Embiid lineups, I just want it to be Embiid basically, because if he's putting up 65, 70, usually the rest of the guys on the team aren't getting there from an optimal standpoint.
I like it.
All right, Jordan. Anything up and coming that the people should know about?
I mean, we're still working behind the scenes. We've got a lot of new features and just some new app updates overall on the front end in the works. Some of these are some bigger projects, so we're cruising along on that. So no updates of anything, really coming out in the next week or so, but we are working on just some big improvements that'll just make things easier to use, bring some new features. I think there's honestly dozens of different fixes going live with that when that's ready. So stay tuned for that.
All right, very good. Well, with that, never hesitate to send me a message, ask questions. We'll get back to you. We have the Sabersim channel in our Discord. Fire your questions there, and we'll get back to you. I'm AP. That's Jordan. Let's run here.